If you're wanting to take your dog camping, you've come to the right video. Today I'm going to go through all that you need to know to keep your best mate comfortable and happy when you're out camping with your four-wheel drive. We'll cover a bunch of tips on how to prepare, set them up, and make it some of the most enjoyable camping you've ever done. For this video, we visited the beautiful Kunghur in northern New South Wales to check out Misty Mountain, a hip camp that's hugely popular to bring pets to. This place was perfect for our weekend with some big open secluded spaces and some jaw-dropping views. Now, like all well-intended videos, mine didn't exactly go to plan for me this weekend. Here's me explaining the beautiful location we're at and doing the intro for this video. Why am I talking over it right now, you might ask? Well, I recently purchased some new U-Butte mics from DJI. These ones. I had a fun surprise after I came home from this weekend to realise a good portion of my videos had no audio behind them due to these. Very fortunately, the bulk of this video survived, but here I am now doing the intro again. This video is coming out first, but I have a whole separate video coming out dedicated to this weekend. Once that video is done, I'll put a link in at the end of this video. There was also a couple of points that I started to talk about that were lost, so we'll make sure that those get covered as well. Right, so we're kicking off from the very start with a couple of things to consider before taking your dog camping. These might be a couple of things that you want to prepare before you head out and make sure that you have organised perfectly. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there was a couple of these points that were lost due to the audio in my original video. So you'll see me talking over myself for this part, and then we're going back to the regular video. First cab off the rank, you want to check if your dog has up-to-date vaccinations. This might be worth checking in with your vet to see if they are due for any. If they're an adult dog, they're probably up to date. If they're a puppy, it's worth making sure that they can go out in the open. In addition to this topic, it's worthwhile checking out when your dog last had their flea and tick prevention given to them. Again, this might be worth checking in with your vet, or maybe chat with your local pet store and see what prevention you can give them in a lead up to going away camping. Next, in Australia, you have to have your dog registered and microchipped. So it's absolutely worthwhile making sure that they have this before going out. The registration ties them to you as their owner, and their microchip is something that can easily be scanned if they're lost to find out who the dog belongs to. An important thing to make sure that stays on your dog the entire time is their collar and tag. And even more importantly, your contact details in case they go missing. So another thing to think about with the collar and tags is actually put down the location of your campsite that you're at. So if your dog does go missing through the night, over the weekend, however long your stay is, if someone finds them, rather than trying to call your mobile number or whatever contact details you got on there, they can probably potentially just bring them straight back to wherever you are. So I've written that down for Austin. I've actually written down Misty Mountain. We're at a place called Site 4. If he runs off, hopefully someone can bring him back. Something to keep an eye out for is whether your dog's sick or under the weather before taking off. We all get sick. So if your dog's crook, you might have to consider cancelling on them or let someone else look after them for the weekend. Good boy, lay down. Good boy. Where are they sleeping? So your dog might just enjoy sleeping out on the grass by himself, especially if it's a farm dog like Austin. They're probably happy just being out there, no problem. Not my dog though. He needs to be comfortable. So I, for instance, have brought along a small little festival tent to put him in. I put his favourite mat in there. He loves just sitting in there, thankfully. So he's happy all night. There's nothing worse than trying to set up camp and you've got a dog that's just full of energy. You don't know what they're doing, where they're going. So it's a good idea to tire them out beforehand if you can, and at least then they can chill out later while you're setting up. You might be happy with them being off the leash for the entire time, and especially if they're a good dog, good recall, all that sort of thing. But you need to think about whether they need to be tied up while they're there, especially overnight. So how are you going to do that? I've brought along a big star picket goes into the ground and a giant rope, and then I've got him tied up to his harness there as well. But most part he's sitting off there. I'm just watching them as they're playing, having a great time. And it's like it's perfect as well because it's the video that I'm doing. So to have dogs fluffing about and running around, it's spot on. Like I couldn't think of anything worse than me just talking in this just vacuum.
Oh, let's bring dogs camping and there's no dogs.
Yeah, like I just have like a stock photo picture of a dog that pops up. So a really important thing is, how is your dog's recall? Austin's is terrible. He's not good at it at all, but I'm working on it. I've been working on it for 5 years, which is how old he is, but he's getting there slowly. But you really want to make sure that you at least try and brush up your dog's recall as much as you can. But it's definitely something you want to think about before you go camping. All right, what type of insurance do they have? I don't have any insurance for my dog. Nick doesn't have insurance for his either, but that's fine. Ours are cattle dogs. They're farm dogs. They're very resilient. Not much goes wrong with them at all. and the few things I've seen that goes wrong with him, he's right as rain the next day. But there's a lot of dogs that things can happen easily, unfortunately. It's worthwhile making sure your dog's insured, and also make sure that your insurance covers you if you're camping as well. So check with your insurer if you're going camping, if they're going to cover you if something goes wrong. Something I just touched on just before is the type of dog you have as well. You might have, what are those little white fluffy? You want to think about what type of dog you have. Maybe do some Googling specifically to the type of dog you have on taking them camping and go through that. All right, talking about the preparation and the things you need to bring for your dog while camping. Food and water, something you're bringing for yourself anyway. You need to make sure that you have enough food for your dog. Make sure you have enough water for your dog as well. So it's easy to think you should just bring the right amount of food for your dog, but it's a good idea to bring just a little bit more, just in case you decide to stay an extra night, in case you get stuck somewhere, just bring a little bit more. Same with water. It's always better to have more than not enough. And what else are you gonna bring with that? I've brought just my dog's bowls that he uses at home. There are a couple of stainless steel ones you can just get from Pet Barn or wherever, but you can get camping specific bowls. It could be for dogs or humans or whatever. Treats. You want to bring treats along to make sure that they come back to you. Reward their good behavior if they're doing something you want them to be doing, or discourage them from doing stuff you don't want them to be doing. Their dog bed. What are they going to sleep on? You want to make sure that they've got a mat or something familiar to them that they can lay on, and that's their space for the weekend. In addition to that, some shelter of some sort. Is it raining? You don't want your dog out in the rain. You don't want them hiding under your car the entire time. It's a good idea to bring some sort of shelter for them. You might go as far as bringing an actual tent for them if you want. There's some pretty cheap little tents out there. That's perfect. There's also some dog specific swags tents. I've seen, there's one from 23Zero that I see I'm really tempted to buy, but it's, I think it's called the Woof Den, but just something to keep them covered. A lot of dogs like to be in crates or small little spaces, so a small festival tent or something is perfect. I've seen the suggestion to bring an extra camp chair for them to sit on. If your dog likes to laze about for the day, you could have a basic mat for them to sit on or something, but a camp chair is great. They can pop up on that, sit down. All right, next thing you want to think about is a harness. It's a good idea to have a harness for your dog, especially something that has a little bit of reflection on it. You can make sure that you can see them at night. See you, Austin. But a harness is great. You can, if you need to, you can tie them up for the moment. You can walk them on their lead. It's an amazing thing to have for them. So I went and bought one of these EzyDog harnesses recently, and it's been awesome for him. Something I touched on earlier, collar and ID tags. You definitely want to have them on your dog the entire time. Don't get lazy and take them off for whatever reason. You want to make sure that if they get away from you for any reason, someone can identify them and also get in contact with you. Something to tie them up. As I said, you want a really heavy stake. I got a little tiny, a short star picket that goes in the ground, and then a really strong rope to hold him overnight. That gives him enough length to walk around a little bit in the night if he wants to, but keeps him in the same vicinity. A couple extra little miscellaneous things to think about. Dog waste bags. If you're at a campsite that people are frequenting regularly, it's just good practice just to pick it up. Any medications for the dog, if they've got treatments or anything that you need to give them every single day, make sure that you bring them as well. Another thing to think about is dog first aid. So I see this come up a lot. I've never had a first aid kit for a dog, but I do have a first aid kit in the car. So it may be worthwhile thinking what extra things you might be able to bring along or have to bring along just in case they get a cut or any kind of dog-related injury. One last little thing, make sure you have a recent picture of your dog. If they do go missing, if you're looking around for them, at least you can show that photo. All right, I'm calling this section of the video Advice from the Experienced. I've actually got our mate Nick came out this weekend. You're like, yes, gotta mention. I'm famous. And he's got two very well-behaved cattle dogs as well that are very similar to Austin. So it's a perfect weekend for those dogs to get along and enjoy camping. But I reached out to him before this and just said, hey, look, you've done this a lot. What advice do you have? And so he gave me some actual really good tips, and they are. So pretty sound advice, just to have a meal planned for each one of them and something like a little chicken drumstick to give them a little treat when they turn up. Just make sure that they're focused on that rather than trying to find something in the bush. It's a good idea to take little snacks for them as well. What Nick actually recommended was cutting up little bits of cheese as like a little treat for them, and just to spend like 10 minutes with them when you actually turn up to your campsite, and just make sure that their recall's up to scratch, and just reward them for coming back to you, just so that you know that they're going to hang around and they know that this is the area. And obviously a very smart thing as well to tie them out as much as possible before you actually turn up to the campsite. and at least then any kind of exercise you do with them is a little bit fun. It's not necessary. All right, the car ride. So you're planning to drive to a campsite. How long is it going to take? You want to factor in having regular stops. Your dog might need some bathroom breaks. It's a good idea to give them some water every time you have a little stop. Do you want to have water in the car? Some sort of bowl to give them some water just in case they need some as they're going along. Where's your dog going to sit in the car? My 4-Dry is fairly loaded up each time I go camping. I've got my back seats full. The entire back of the car has drawers, the fridge. I've got stuff on the roof. I barely have enough room for a passenger in the front a lot of the time when I go camping. So if you're going with yourself, your partner, your kids, where's your dog going to sit? If you have space in the back, that's great. If they're in the front, it's worth checking the state regulations on where your dog can be in the car. So in Queensland, fines can be issued if a driver is distracted by their dog in the front. So for this trip, I had my dog in the front, but he wasn't distracting me. But you just want to be careful about that as well. Just make sure that they're secure and safe. Probably a good idea to seatbelt them in somehow, and that's where the harness comes into play as well. If you're going camping with them regularly, it might be worthwhile thinking about having a custom dog box or canopy or something that they can actually sit in as well. So you can put them in there. Dogs love a little space that they can call their own. So if they're in there, they're comfortable, they've got a little mat, they've got treats, water, whatever you need, they'll be golden. But if you're doing it regularly, it's worthwhile making that decision. And another thing to think about is, do they get car sick? Yeah, yuck. He looked a bit car sick for a little bit there. You want to make sure that they're not looking at the ground constantly, they're not getting motion sickness. All right, the location. So you don't want to just turn up somewhere and just assume that dogs are okay. You want to think about whether they're allowed. So if it's private property, speak to the owner. If it's a hip camp, again, you might want to speak to the owner, or just on the messages in there, just double check if dogs are allowed. They'll usually say that dogs are allowed on a hip camp, and often you have to add them to that. Either way, if it's a property, it's worthwhile just getting in touch with the owner and just double checking, just seeing what the surroundings are like, and do that. If it's a national park, absolutely you need to look up whether dogs are allowed. So there's a lot of national parks that you cannot bring dogs. In Queensland, you can look up the National Parks website, and I'll put that up here for a second, and you can actually see on each national park website that you're looking at, it'll have a dogs permitted, no dogs permitted icon on it. There's a lot of places like Fraser Island and Moreton Island where there's strictly no dogs allowed. Fraser Island's a massive one because the dingo population, so you can't have any dogs there because they're going to probably get attacked by wild dogs. You guessed it. Moreton Island, dogs are allowed on there, but only for residents. So if you don't live there, you can't bring your dog along. If you live there, you probably need to get special permission, but if you're just visiting, that's besides the point. Regardless of where you go, check the leash rules. So make sure that they are allowed to be off the leash, or if they have to be on a leash the entire time. So where you're camping, if you're unsure, it's best to start somewhere a little bit more secluded, somewhere with a little bit more space so your dog can roam around, but you can keep an eye on them. If you got an overexcited or an aggressive dog, it's definitely a good idea to have that more secluded campsite. You don't want them bothering other campers, chasing down their dog if they have them. You really want to just make sure you have the right location specific for your dog. All right, a quick little one. Environment. We got it pretty good in Queensland. The conditions don't really change that much. Summer, it's hot. Yep. Winter, it's cold. Your dog's gonna be fine. Other places like Victoria, Tasmania, you start getting snow, you start getting into negative degrees. You want to think about the location that you're in and the conditions they're in as well. Does your dog need a coat? Do they need little tiny booties or something just to make sure that their feet don't get frozen if you're in the snow? Just something to think about where you're going and just protect your dog appropriately. All right, activities for your dog. When you actually get to your campsite, what are you going to do with your dog? So you bring your dog along because you probably enjoy spending time with them, I hope. Bring them lots of toys that you can play with, balls to throw, frisbees, things to chuck. Your dog might, there's like puzzles out there you can get for dogs they can play with. There might be hikes that you can go on. Again, make sure that your dogs can actually be on that hike. If it's a national park, if they need to be on a leash. Hey bud, what you lay down there? No, bye. he's like, fuck you. Obviously you want to give your dog lots of attention while you're out. If you've got other dogs floating around, that's awesome because then they're going to take up all their time. They're going to tire them out. If your dog's by themselves, maybe think about getting a nice fresh bone from the butcher. They can just park themselves there for a couple of hours and get stuck into that. I'm just watching Austin harass Tyson. Do you ever do that? Do you be like, is my dog a jerk? Righto, so that's just a quick summary on all the things that I would recommend keeping in mind if you're going to take your dog camping. There's a ton more things out there, and certainly
do your own Googling, do your own research. If you're in somewhere other than Australia, research specific to your region. But look, my dog doesn't come camping with me lots, but I'm so glad I took him this weekend and he's having a great time so far. He's meeting some new friends. He's getting tired out way more than he would be if he was sitting at home while I was out camping. And it's just such a more richer experience. So highly worthwhile doing, but it's worthwhile making sure you're doing it right and just do that little bit of research and especially that little bit of preparation. Hey. That's not camera appropriate, Austin. But look, if you found this video really helpful, even if there was just one tip that was helpful that you found on here, I really appreciate if you give it a like. If you've watched more videos of mine than just this video, consider giving it a subscribe, but it really does help me. So thank you to Paul and Nick over here that have been sitting here listening to me waffle on for the last hour or whatever. And our beautiful step-ins, Austin, Chase and Tyson as well. So that's it. Anyway, short video. So cheers. If you got to the end of this, thank you. Hooroo. Right, that's it, we're done.